Hello, everybody.
Howdy.
Just wanted to give a few of our thoughts about the oxygen investigations. Wow, I think episode 2 upset me more than anything.
Defendant.
Yeah.
Yes, it's sad when you actually get to visually see these things played out. And, you know, we've watched several of you guys' videos already, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But did you want to talk about how part 2, you really can't get part 2 on Facebook? And
Yeah, the links are disappearing and they're taking it down for copyright strikes. I know episode 1 is still on the original Facebook link that I had posted underneath the first video. I mentioned it. That one is still working. But if you go under a nail and coffin, there's a Google Drive link now at the top of the comments, and that one should be working until they at least take that one down.
yeah,
Fortunately, several of us have both episodes, but we're just trying to find a way, to get these. And I know it is a copyright issue. I understand that. And that second episode was really disturbing for me. And especially at the end when Zolkin is trying to serve the governing body those legal papers. And I think it was Trey Bundy that even mentioned compound.
yeah.
To me, watching that whole ordeal, it was like seeing Jim Jones, when that congressman went down to check things out to see what was going on. It was, the same thing all over again.
Yeah.
These governing body, they're up in their ivory tower and they send all these little lapdogs to get rid of everybody. Oh, call the police. And all of this. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
One thing over the past couple of days, Kim and I have gotten several calls from mates of fully indoctrinated Jehovah's Witnesses. And they got some of them to sit down and watch it, and you got the general canned response, oh, these are apostate lies. And one of them even had the audacity to go, la 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 la, or,
We're Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's how they respond to it.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. It's really, really sad that a human being will allow an organization like the Watchtower Society to destroy their families. And that's what this organization is doing.
Yeah.
And we're all sitting back, what can we do? What can we do? And, it's nice to sit in front of the camera and say, yeah, Watchtower's trying to change their policy, but they're not going to do it because the Constitution, at least in this country, guarantees, like I said, they can do and say whatever they want. As long as the people are dumb enough to follow, these people are well within their rights to do whatever they want. I mean, come on, Jehovah's Witnesses. You even heard your governing body members say, we're not inspired, we're not infallible, but you still kiss their asses.
They're still roving about.
Yeah.
But they will still, defend this organization even to their death.
Their dying breath.
Now, Debbie McDaniel, we got her book when it first came out, and you heard her story in the first episode, and that was so infuriating. Her dad was on the judicial hearing with this Ronnie Lawrence. And then to sit with Ronnie during the court hearing instead of with his daughter, I don't know how, ones in that congregation could support him after all of that. And he was a serial abuser. They still don't know how many victims he had. And, I agree with MKT.
MKT, I was going to say the same thing.
Even as a woman, I mean, if someone would abuse my kid, oh my God, I would probably still be in prison because I would have beat them to a pulp, with my bare hands, ripped their face off or something. I mean, oh my goodness.
Well, here's the hypocrisy that is the Jehovah's Witnesses. They'll take this Bible, they'll go from door to door and show you the scriptures in 1 Timothy 3:1-5, and it'll get down to the point where it says, and the time of the end, there'll be no natural affection. This piece of garbage that sat behind Ronnie while his daughter was on the other side of the courtroom, there's no natural affection. It's gone. And I've said this before in other videos. Jehovah's Witnesses are completely self-fulfilling those scriptures in Timothy. The same ones that they cram down everybody's throat. While they're trying to point it at the world, it's actually them that are fulfilling they're the ones without natural affection. I mean, Watchtower, Jehovah's Witnesses, you guys will use something where a woman will throw her child down in a porta-john. And yet, you Jehovah's Witnesses that are shunning your families, that are sitting with the perpetrators in court, while your daughter and family members are crying on the other side. You're the ones that are throwing your kids right down the shitter. It ain't the world, it's you. But you can't see it because you're so in love with this.
Now, we had done a video, about a week ago? And it was how Watchtower is toppling its own kingdom. Mm-hmm. And in that article, it talks about not to hide the perpetrators. Basically, take your sentence, take your justice, take what is deserving of you from the superior authorities. And that's the thing, is they're not following their own rules.
That's right.
And, thank you, XJW Analyzer, for the shout out. But that article was so infuriating because, we grew up in the time where they were constantly bashing the Catholic Church.
Oh,
and
yeah.
when this came out in the 90s, if I remember correctly, about the Catholic Church and their abuse problem, it was 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
But I can remember working out in service and going to the door and saying, oh, have you heard about the Catholic Church? They've got a pedophile priest problem.
Yep.
So all these years they've been bashing the Catholic Church for this. All the while they were doing worse.
Yep.
They're doing
Unbelievable.
worse.
Yeah.
Hiding murder and everything else under the clergy penitent privilege.
Yep. It's just amazing. And then watching what's that channel? Psychological, I think it was.
Psychological.
I really enjoyed that video because he talked about his family members watching it, and you got just the canned general Jehovah Witness response. And it's really amazing to me, and I even speak from my own experience with my own mother, how my mother can sit and listen to the governing body and swallow everything they say. Men she's never even talked with, she will believe them before she believes her own flesh and blood. And that's the struggle that a lot of you PMOs are faced with, because your family members would rather listen to strangers, stranger danger, than their own flesh and blood. They trust strangers than their own flesh and blood. That's how screwed up this religion is.
And watching this, it makes you realize, even though we knew they were destroying evidence and stuff, it's disturbing how they're accomplices. And like we've always said, the governing body and the elders know they are accomplices. They should be in these lawsuits as well.
Yeah.
And Chessa, sweetie, thank you so much for telling your story, and we're so sorry to hear about your dad.
That was sad. That was sad.
That was sad that this poor man, he did the right thing. He contacted the authorities. And he even went as far to contact Stephen Litt, who brought him into this organization, and tell him, look, we need to change these policies. And the poor man drank himself to death. And what did Stephen Lett do? Write a letter back and with a canned response and say, oh, well, I'm glad you're still serving Jehovah.
Yeah, now, think about that, guys. This piece of crap right here and the rest of these pieces of crap think they're going to go to heaven and rule over the earth? How screwed up is that?
They can't even rule over one organization. What makes them think they can rule over the entire world?
Yeah. Let brought that guy into the truth. And then Let stood by and did nothing while the man drank himself to death.
And what's really disturbing is then Let goes and he does that little speech he did back in, what was it? 2016, 2017 on the broadcast.
Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organization. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? If anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it's Jehovah's organization.
If anybody protects children, it's Jehovah's organization. You are a liar. You're a liar. You're trying to protect your organization and yourselves and your money.
That's right.
That's all you're trying to do.
Protect that money. Okay, now something else that really bothered me about, I believe it was in part 2 when the search warrant was served and the authorities get there opening up the file cabinet and it's empty. They got tipped off. And also in part 2, they bought a shredder and shredded certain documents because they knew the authorities were coming. I gotta ask, who is tipping off Watchtower? Right here, guys. Who's tipping off Watchtower?
Do they have a brethren in the judge's office or maybe the district attorney's office?
Did anybody think about that?
That tipped them off? Who is tipping off the elders in the congregation? Is there a Jehovah Witness working in the office of these legal establishments?
That bothered me more than anything, to be honest with you, because somebody in the government, all the way up to the judge who signed the paperwork for the search warrants, tipped off the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Someone
Think
tipped
about
them
it.
off.
And we all sit here wondering why we can't get nothing done. Duh.
Yeah.
Because they've got connections anywhere and everywhere. It's what we've been saying for a very long time. And here again, in this country, the United States of America, the Watchtower Bible Craft Society can do whatever they want. They can come up with whatever policy they want. You know, like the blood policy. It's against God's law, so all those kids die. And then back in 2006, they change it and say, well, it's a conscience matter. We should have all learned right there and then that those guys can do whatever the hell they want without any accountability.
Yeah.
This is something that you really have to get your lawyers to seriously look at and consider. Hush money. You're not going to be able to get down and get these cults gone by going after them from a religious perspective. They don't have to change their policies. The Constitution guarantees that. As long as they've got followers that are just sheeple, you know, the blind leading the blind, and they'll all both fall into a pit, it's never going to change. It's nice to sit there and say, yeah, you know, however one word sentence you ever want to say, well, the Australian Royal Commission did this or whatever, it doesn't matter. You've heard those guys on their broadcasts. We will never change because the Constitution guarantees they can do anything they want with that Bible. You have to go after them and their 501c3 because they are a state-operated business. Get your lawyers to find a copy of this and read this book, Hush Money.
And it's interesting, this man, what's his name?
Peter Kershaw.
Disappeared after he wrote this book, and he hasn't been heard from since, and his book has disappeared. I just happened to find this copy at a thrift store.
Yeah, well, let me just read the back of the book. It's the biggest con job ever perpetrated against the churches of America. It is impossible to have religious freedom in any nation where churches are licensed to the government. And that's what the 501c3 is. It's a license to operate as a state business. In this book, Mr. Kershaw exposes the root cause problems of rampant and unhindered immorality, government tyranny and corruption, and the inability of the state-licensed church to offer any real hope for combating these devastating societal problems. As long as the church, as long as Watchtower has a 501c3, going after them from a religious perspective is going to fail.
Yeah, especially on doctrine or policy. Now, it's interesting because we were watching a video just the other night, and it was, there was an ex-Mormon, and he made the comment, he said, "Isn't it interesting that the prophet gets this prophecy, this light from God, to allow blacks into their church and get rid of the racism problem within the Mormon church. At the very same time, President Carter was threatening their 501c3 nonprofit charity status." Isn't that amazing how that works? You know, just like Watchtower gets this thunderbolt, you know, prophecy from Jehovah to just offer their literature on a donation basis. At the same time, you know, a televangelist is in court fighting because he's selling his books.
For a profit.
It's interesting how that works.
Yeah. Guys, it's going to take patience and it's going to take tenacity and it's going to take getting away from the thought process of getting them to change their policies, because Watchtower is not going to do that. They've already proved that. They've already proved that. That's how arrogant these people are. You need to get to them from the perspective of business.
Well, that's why at the end when they showed Sarah Brooks, "Hi, cuz."
Yeah.
That would be cool if we were related.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, she was a warrior in there before the Pennsylvania Senate, you know, trying to get the laws changed. And this is the same law that I did a video about several weeks ago, that they're trying to get these laws changed with the statute of limitations. And Pennsylvania is actually looking at a similar law to what New York, the Child Reporting Act, they're trying to do the same thing in Pennsylvania, only give them 2 years and then raise the statute of limitations to 55 years of age. And I would love to see that in that, which should become a federal you know, law.
Well, see, and that goes right along with what I just said moments ago. If they have a 501c3, they are a state corporation. The state can dictate what they can do. The state can do that at a state level. But to getting them to change their shunning policy, the state ain't going to do that, because that becomes a matter of biblical interpretation.
Well, not only that, but Watchtower knows it works.
That's right.
You know, just like the Mormon Church knows their policies and rules work. It keeps them in. These minors, it keeps them in until they're 18. Like we just mentioned, the Mormon Church, you have to be 18 to leave. You can get baptized at 8. You know, you have the capability of knowing what you're doing at 8 years old, but to leave the church, you have to be 18. That was just crazy to me.
Yeah.
But, you know, Watchtower knows this works. They know there are thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of PMOs in the organization. And they know the minute they do away with the shunning policy and the disfellowshipping policy, that they're going to lose all of these members. So they are not going to change that.
And really, you know, Watchtower loses either way because these PMOs ain't donating money. The money's drying up.
Yeah, exactly.
The money's drying up.
Yeah, but I was glad to see at the end of episode 2 them talking about this grand jury investigation, and let's hope, you know, that they can do the same thing, because it's the same district attorney. Let's hope they can do the same thing against witnesses that they did against the Catholic Church in that state, and get other states now to investigate them. And I would love to see, you know, an Australia Royal Commission done here in the United States, only it would be before a Senate committee.
Right.
I would love to see the same thing, you know, haul those governing body in, and the board of directors in Pennsylvania, and the president of Watchtower, Karenko, I call him Krenko,
Yeah.
and have them answer for all of this. Those are the ones they should be subpoenaing.
Yeah.
Subpoenaing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But I was just going to mention that I have heard from the grapevine that there are other survivors that are bravely stepping up now and contacting Trey Bundy
Yeah.
and lawyers.
Yeah.
Lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a snowball effect. But I do have one last thing I want to say to Let. How dare you get in front of the camera and say that it's apostate-generated lies that you are protecting or permissive towards pedophiles when you yourself signed a letter knowing well what took place. You knew, and you didn't care. Where's your moral compass? How can you even sit here and tell the Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm going to heaven, I'm going to be one of the 144,000, I'm going to be with Jesus Christ, I'm going to see Jehovah face to face? How dare you assume that title? You have no right. None of the governing body has any right to assume that title. But hey, you governing body members know as well as I do. When it comes to this book, you can say and do whatever the hell you want. Because you'll always have people gullible enough to follow it. Because they don't know this as well as you do.
Yeah, and as we've come to understand the past 7 years, that it is not God the Father this organization is in contact with or worshiping or serving. So if they go to see their God face to face, I think they're going to be really surprised of what God it is.
That's right.
And if there is a hell, I personally don't believe in one, but if there is a hell, I think there's going to be a special place reserved for ones like this.
Exactly.
So thank you for listening, and we hope you all have a wonderful week.
Bye.